Hello and welcome to this webinar on data for dissertations. Sorry, I just started on mute there. My name's Jen Buckley and I'm joined by Ali Bloom, and we're from the UK Data Service User Support and Training team, and we're based up at the University of Manchester. And we're looking forward to talking today about some of the data that we've got available for dissertations, the resources that we have to help you, and also the UK Data Service Dissertation Award. Okay, and so here's an overview of today's session. I'll start with a very quick introduction to the UK Data Service, and then we'll move to look at some specific data sets available and case studies of real dissertation projects that have used UK Data Service data. We'll cover some of the basics about how to go around finding data and accessing data for a project. We'll discuss the Dissertation Award, which is open to students using data from the UK Data Service. We'll then finish up with information on resources that we've got available, and then it will be your chance to ask questions. For questions, you're going to need to type them into a question box, as you'll be on mute through the webinar. The question box is part of the webinar control panel. If you can't see it, you might need to maximize it. If you look for a little arrow that maximizes and minimizes the control panel. Type your questions at any point, and then we'll pick them all up at the end. In the control panel as well, you should be able to find a handout that goes with today's session, and this handout includes links to everything that we'll be talking about. We'll also make this available on the website along with the recording and presentations. So what is the UK Data Service? So it's a research resource that allows people to access a wide range of social science data. And we also provide training and support through activities like this. And we're funded to do this work by an organisation called the ESRC, which is the Economic and Social Research Council. And what kind of data do we have? So we've got a wide range of data in our collection, and it includes data from nationally representative surveys of the UK and also of other countries, including cross-national studies. Data from major longitudinal studies that follow individuals through their lives. Data from the UK Census, data from qualitative studies such as interview transcripts and field notes, and data from international macro data databases such as the World Bank Development Indicators. And collectively, the data collection that we have available covers a wide range of social science topics. So we've got data relating to work and employment, but also politics, things around immigration or well-being. So at this point, I've got a quiz question for you. So which of the following do you think we have in our collection? So hopefully you should see some options appearing on your screen. And so the options are 30 years of data from a survey of British public opinion, interview transcripts relating to the regulation of bingo, a regular survey of UK households on the impact of COVID-19, transcripts of parliamentary debates, and data from children born in 2000 at 7 different time points. Okay, and I think we're now ready just to have a little look at some of the results. What are we getting? Okay, so yeah, most of, as the answer suggests, we've got most of these in our collection. So we've got the first one, which 93% of you see is from the British Social Attitudes. This is an ongoing survey that's been going for more than 30 years now. The second one, interview transcripts relating to the regulation of bingo. So yes, this is actually in our collection. So it's a qualitative study that looked around the regulation of what's actually a globally significant form of gambling. And option number 3, so this is the Understanding Society COVID-19 study, which has been interviewing households about the socioeconomic impacts of the COVID pandemic since April. And the latest edition contains data from April, May and June of this year. Now, transcripts of parliamentary debates we don't actually have in our collection, but they are available through Hansard. And the last one, data from children born in 2000 at 7 different time points, this is referencing the Millennium Cohort Study. So this is a longitudinal study that's been following the lives of people born at the start of the millennium. Okay, so if we now move on to have a look at why you might want to use our data. So a big reason is that using data already collected can save resources such as time and money, which are very limited when doing a dissertation project. It also allows you to use data that you just couldn't collect yourself and to do research you could not do otherwise. So for example, you can use data from large nationally representative samples. You can use data collected at previous points in time or multiple points in time. And all of this means it might actually be the right kind of data for your research questions, and it could be data that really you couldn't get from anywhere else. Also, with data collections coming from organisations such as the ONS or large academic projects, you get access to high quality data collected by experts. But obviously there are some disadvantages and challenges. So finding suitable data might not be possible, or you might find data and it just not be perfect. So this might mean things like having to think again about your project, or being aware of some of the limitations of what you can find out or with the data that you've got. And there's also work to do to get to the point where you can understand the data that you have. So at this point, we'd love to know whether you know whereabouts, whether you know what your dissertation topic is. About 60% of you feel yes, you do know your dissertation topic. Some of you are a bit undecided, about a quarter of you, and then some of you don't know your topic yet. So hopefully for some of you, you might be able to find data that's relevant for your topic, and others maybe you'll find some inspiration to help you either way. And now I'm just going to pass you over to Ali, who will talk through some of the different types of data sets that we've got and give some examples of other projects using data from the data service.
Thanks, Jen. So I'm just going to give you an example of some of the data that we hold at the UK Data Service that you might want to use for your dissertation. So the first set of data that I will tell you about is international macro data. So this is data that has been aggregated to a country or regional level. It's time series data, and depending on the database, it will be available annually, quarterly, or monthly. And the databases are updated really regularly, so it is a really good source of recent up-to-date data. It's typically produced by international government organisations, and it covers a wide range of topics such as economics, trade, industry, employment, human development, demography, and many other topics such as that. And it is really useful to compare differences between countries and also to look at change over time. So here is an example of that. So this is a chart which shows the proportion of seats held by women in Parliament in the United Kingdom over time. And this chart has been generated using ukds.stat, which is a tool that you can access on the UK Data Service website, and you can use this to explore the international macro data that we hold. So now we're going to come on to look at census data. So census data is collected every 10 years, and at the UK Data Service, we provide access to census data for the 1971 to 2011 censuses. So census data aims to cover 100% of the population, and it's often used as a baseline for other statistics. And it covers many different topics, and I'll go on to talk about these in a slide later on, just in a minute. And one really good thing about census data is that it's available in many different geographies, right down to small geographies. So this makes it possible to reliably compare data across lots of different areas. Census data is also divided into lots of different outputs, such as aggregate data, which is higher level summary statistics, boundary data, and this can be used for creating maps or presenting data for different geographical areas. We also have flow data, which shows the movement of people across areas for work or just moving around, and microdata. So these are individual samples from records of a single census. So here are some of the topics covered by the census. So demographics, migration, income, family, class, and education are just some examples here. So these might be some topics that you want to look at or use in your dissertation, and the census is a really good place to look and explore to find these topics. So when you are looking at census data, though, it's really important to note that not all census files contain all topics. So some might contain different geographical levels depending on levels of access, and also sometimes new topics are introduced between censuses. So you might want to have a look through the data and make sure it contains what you're interested in. So here is an example of an interesting way that census data can be used. So here the boundary data has been combined with the aggregate data, and this creates a map showing the percentage of people who were born in the UK and do not hold a passport. So this has been created using the country of birth and the passport health variables together, along with the 2011 boundary data at the local authority level. And it creates this really good map. So things like this can be really useful as a background for introducing your dissertation and the kind of backdrop that you're working against. So now I'm going to move on to look at UK surveys that we hold. So we hold lots of UK surveys at the UK Data Service, and they cover a wide range of topics that you might be interested in looking at for your dissertation. So for instance, we have large-scale surveys looking at employment, work, health, family finances, crime, etc. And here on the slide, you can see some of these surveys organised under the topics that they cover. So for example, the Labour Force Survey addresses the topic of employment at work. Attitudes and opinions are covered by things like the British Social Attitudes Survey and Eurobarometer. So here is an example of one of the UK surveys that we hold. So this is Understanding Society. Understanding Society is a longitudinal household panel study. It looks at 40,000 households and 100,000 individuals. It has an ethnic minority boost sample and also specific questions for younger participants. So this allows detailed research to be carried out on different experiences from different people across the UK. So some of the topics that it covers include things like employment and earnings, political party identification, environmental behaviours, and it can also be used to be internationally compared with other panel surveys from different countries across the world. And its predecessor, the British Household Panel Survey, has been harmonised with this data. So altogether, there's 25 years of panel data which can be analysed. And I just want to mention that although this is a longitudinal study, the individual data sets can be really useful for cross-sectional analysis, looking at one point in time, for example, for a dissertation project, and it provides a really large sample to do this if this is something that you're interested in. So I've got a few examples later of dissertations that have done this, so don't be afraid of using longitudinal data sort of cross-sectionally in situations like this. So another example of UK survey data is the British Social Attitudes Survey. So the British Social Attitudes Survey measures public attitudes in Britain, and its aim is to look at the patterns of continuity and change in social attitudes over time. It's been run every year since 1993, and like Jen said in the quiz earlier, there are over 30 years of data on the public attitudes, and it has a sample size of approximately 3,000. So this survey has core questions that are asked most years, and also modules that look at particular social, economic, political and moral issues. And a few other surveys that we hold do this, so things like the Opinions and Lifestyle Survey do particular modules to look at particular issues that are relevant to the time. So if you're looking at surveys that do this, it's important that you have a look, explore the data sets and make sure that the topics that you're interested in are in that particular year of the survey. So here are an example of some of the case studies of dissertations that have used UK Data Service data. So 3 of these case studies are Dissertation Award winners. Jen will discuss the Dissertation Award later. but I just want to talk to you about some of the different ways that these dissertations have used the UK Data Service data. So 3 of these studies have used understanding society, but they've all used it in very different ways and used it cross-sectionally like we discussed earlier. So the study Common Ground, a study of urban public space and wellbeing across London, this student used understanding society along with green space information for Greater London data, and they looked at whether the public space that people had around their houses, so for example things like green space like parks, or outdoor space compared to hard space such as car parks or hard play areas. And they looked at how this impacted on the individual's well-being. Another study that used understanding society looked at how class affects attitudes to the environment. So they used the environmental questions in understanding society and the social class variables to see whether people from certain social classes were more likely to complete pro-environmental behaviours such as recycling or using alternative transport, things like that. So, and another study that used understanding society, another dissertation, used the questions for the younger people, and this looked at family and school attachments in relation to youth violence. So looked at things such as whether playing truant from school or how often children spoke to their parents, whether this impacted their levels of youth violence. And the final example, which doesn't use understanding society, this uses the quarterly labour force survey, which I mentioned earlier. The quarterly labour force survey was used by this student alongside some information and estimates from the Office for National Statistics to look at the impact that EU migration had on the productivity in the UK. So as you can see, there are lots of different ways to use the UK Data Service data and lots of different ways to use the same study. And it's also really interesting and useful to combine the data with topics from other sources, but as you can see, it also works really well on its own as well. So just before I pass back to Jen, we're just going to have another quick poll. So I'd just like to know what type of data interests you. So of the data that we've talked about, you should see it on screen now. So just tick those. Brilliant, thank you. So I can see that quite a lot of you are interested in the UK and cross-national survey data, slightly less interested in the international macro data, and quite a few people interested in the qualitative data. Brilliant, thank you. So I'm now going to hand over to Jen, who's going to talk you through how to find some of this data and how to access it on the website.
Great, thanks, Ali. So how do we find data? So the main thing is there's a searchable data catalogue where you just pick your search terms, a bit like Google, and then there's ways to refine and sort your search. You can access the catalogue directly from the homepage of our website. There's also currently a Get Data section of the website. We have a new website coming very soon, and so the appearance and navigation will change a bit in sort of towards the end of the month, start of next month. But generally, the main sort of features will stay the same. So under Get Data, at the moment, we've got these key data section, which provides a sort of accessible links to the major data collections by each of the data types that Ali's just talked you through. So, for example, on the screen here, we can see the key data for UK surveys, and from here you can access 35 different social survey programmes, and then you can select other options including the longitudinal studies or the qualitative data collections. There are also theme pages on the website, and these collect together data and also resources for key topics. So these include things like ageing, crime, health, housing, politics and poverty. So you know which topic you're interested in. That can be quite a good place to look at the variety of data that's available. When it comes to accessing data, our main message is that students can access the majority of the data in our collection for their research projects. There are, however, different access arrangements in place, and some data cannot be accessed for undergraduate projects. So I'll talk you through some of the different access arrangements that you can find. So we have some open data collections. So these are data that you can access, or they're available without you needing to register or provide some authentication. The majority of our data is classed as safeguarded and is available under what we call the end user license. And this is easily accessible, but requires a simple registration process with the UK Data Service. Students doing dissertation projects should register individually. So it should be that a lecturer isn't giving data for students to work on during a dissertation project, and you shouldn't use this kind of data that you might have got in a previous class. So you should come and register with the UK Data Service to access the data for your research project. And students at UK higher education institutions can register and access data using their institutional username and password. So when you come to log in, you can indicate your institution and then it will take you through to their login page. And then to download a data set, you need to set up a project, and this is fairly simple. What you'll need to do is to give a project name. So for example, something like dissertation project on whichever your topic is, and then you give a short description. And you don't have to worry at this stage about what kind of details you need to give. It's just to provide a general overview of what you might like, what you're using the data for. So it could be just describing that you're thinking about using this data to do a dissertation on this kind of topic, to look at these types of things. Special license data comes with some additional conditions that need to be fulfilled before you can access the data. And these vary across different data collections, and they may or may not prevent student access. So what you'll have to do in these cases is read the conditions and see. In some cases, fulfilling the conditions can take a bit of time. So for example, sometimes we have to go to the data owners and ask permission for access to the data. And that can become a little bit of a problem if you're working to a tight deadline. So any advice in general is to look early and to see if there's any of these kind of problems. And if at any point it's not clear to you, contact us and ask for help. And then finally, the other type of access condition that you might find is control data. So this relates to data where it becomes more likely that participants in the study could be identified. And for this reason, access to control data is limited and it's not available to undergraduate students doing research projects. In addition to downloading data, so some data collections can be accessed via online tools. So Ali's already mentioned UKDS.stat for exploring international databases. We also have Nestar, which is a tool for exploring many of the survey data sets that are available. And these online tools allow you to do things like explore the data and also to make tables and graphs that you can then download. And this option might be particularly good for students who are collecting and analysing their own data, but perhaps looking for some additional data to support their discussion. So for example, a chart to show the prevalence of something. And you can find guides to using these tools, including video tutorials, on our website. A question now for you again. We'd like to know, from where you are at the moment, do you think you will collect your own data, do secondary analysis of data, collect your own data and do some secondary analysis, or you're not sure yet? All right, let's just look at the results. Okay, so about half of you are quite clear you're doing secondary analysis of data. That's wonderful. Some are collecting their own data and doing secondary analysis. So it's a bit of a combination. And those unsure yet, hopefully we can provide some information that might help you either way. And remember, at the end, you'll have the chance to ask questions if there's anything that you're unsure about accessing data for secondary analysis. Okay, and for those who are thinking of doing secondary analysis with data from the UK Data Service, I'm just going to run through now some of the information about the Dissertation Award. So we are running the award this year. We ran it last year as well. And the aim of the award is to recognise outstanding undergraduate dissertations that include the sort of excellent reuse of data. And we'll be looking to award 3 dissertations this year. So we'll pick the best 3 that we get. And each winner will receive a £300 award and publicity via the website, blog and newsletter. The award is open to undergraduate students at UK universities who are doing their dissertation on social science topics, and the dissertations must use data available via the UK Data Service. And to enter, you need to complete an entry form, which is available on our website, and then you submit this form using your institutional email to us by lunchtime on the 1st of July. We do an initial shortlisting process, and then if shortlisted, you'll be asked to submit your full dissertation, and the work will send off to the judges. The entry form, we've tried to keep the entry form as simple as possible, as we understand mainly that students will be for are the title of your dissertation. We ask you to clearly indicate which data from the UK Data Service you've used. And then we ask you to briefly explain your research aims and questions. So what was it that you were wanting to find out and why did you want to find it out, but with a maximum word limit of 200 words. We also want to know about the data and methods you used and why they might have been suited to the research aims that you had. So for instance, we'd be quite interested in learning about why it was that that data set was particularly a good choice for your research question. And this bit's important as it helps us to understand the sort of thought behind the use of data. And then finally, briefly, we ask you to summarise the main findings and perhaps drawing on what the implications might be. And we'd like at this point to include some example of how you've used the data to draw conclusions. So that this might be a particularly important graph or table, or for those who are doing the analysis of qualitative data, a really insightful excerpt of an interview, for example. And that's the sort of whole process of applying for the award. It all happens, as I said, in July. So if you did enter, you'd need to be sort of aware that you might need to, if shortlisted, submit your dissertation quite quickly after the deadline. In previous years, we've had a real mix of entries with students using different data sets and working on varied topics, and this has been really great to see. There's some examples here. So for example, we've had students use the British Social Attitude Survey, but also things like the Wealth and Asset Survey, Crime Survey for England and Wales. And the best place to look is, we've got the handout that we've made available now, and that includes links to the dissertation case studies that Ali talked about, and also links to descriptions of previous winners. One thing I will say is that it's really lovely that lots of you are interested in the analysis of qualitative data, because so far we've not had as many entries of people using qualitative data in their dissertations, and so we would definitely welcome seeing more of those this year. So at this point, I'll pass you over to Ali, who's going to talk through some of the resources that we have available that might help you in your dissertation.
Thank you, Jen. So I'm just going to run through some of the resources, like Jen said, that might be useful while you're doing your dissertations. So the first resource we have is the Understanding Survey Data Guide. This is a really comprehensive guide that will talk you through step by step all the process of doing a dissertation with secondary data, starting with finding a research question and data that suits this, right through how to analyse and report your results. And it also contains worksheets with further guidance to really help you think through every step of doing the dissertation. The next resource we have is the Dissertations and Their Data Promoting Research Integrity guide, and this guide helps talk you through some of the key considerations when you're working with data, such as managing it and storing it, formatting, copyright, and ethical considerations. And it also contains a handy checklist to make sure that you're handling your data correctly, as well as examples of good practice, practical templates for getting consent, and links to slides for anyone who wants to teach about using data correctly. If you want to learn more about survey data and how it can be used, we have our online interactive data skills modules. So these are designed for users who want to get to grips with key aspects of survey, longitudinal or aggregate data. So you can find these on our website, and on the screen here you can see an example of some of the questions and some of the things that are taught in these modules. So this example is about calculating confidence intervals. And these are being updated currently, so do keep an eye out for the newer versions too, which should be up relatively soon. So as well as the two guides that I mentioned before, there are also further useful guides available to help you with different aspects of your dissertation and working with data. So for example, we have guides that show you how to work with specific software such as Stata, SPSS or R. There are also guides for particular things such as doing weighting and working with surveys with complex sample designs. Things like analysing change over time. So if that's something you're interested in looking at with your dissertation questions, we have a guide specifically for that. And also guides looking at things like mapping census data or using the census microdata. That last point, I've missed a word off there, but it should say mapping 2011 census microdata using R. So that's how to do different types of data analysis with the different software that you might want to use. So as you know, as you're attending this one, we hold webinars to teach about the data that we hold. And here are a few upcoming webinars that you might be interested in and might be helpful for your dissertation. So we have a series of introductory webinars coming up. So we have some looking at the introduction to the UK data service, one going into more detail about finding and accessing UK service data. So we talked briefly about that, but this webinar should give you some more information on that. And also a webinar getting started with secondary analysis. So if you're not entirely sure how to start with your data, that might be a really good webinar to attend. We also have the Data in the Spotlight series. So this is looking specifically at certain types of data that we hold, such as census data, mixed methods data, and the International Time Series data. And coming soon, we also have a upcoming webinar series focused on different types of census data and how to use and access these with our online tools. So keep an eye out on the events page for any more info, and all the past and future webinar recordings are available on our YouTube channel. So if there are topics that you think you might be interested in and you can't see any webinars upcoming on that topic, do go and have a look on the YouTube channel, because it may well be that we've had a webinar in the past that covers this topic that should be able to answer some of your questions. And finally, on the resources, we have some resources for those who are interested in computational social science. So we used to call this new forms of data, so you might have seen it referred to as this on the website or in some of our older webinar series. But computational social science covers things such as working with big data, writing code, or applying analytical methods from other disciplines to the social sciences. So if you want to find out more about computational social sciences, the handout does have a link to a blog post which introduces it and gives a bit more detail about what that covers. And it also covers methods such as web scraping and text mining. And we have had previous webinars on these topics. These are available to watch on the YouTube channel as well. And if you access them through the past events page, you should also be able to access the GitHub links and all the code to give you information if you want to practice working with data in that way. So the resources can be found under the Use Data section of the website. and this also links to the student pages, but most of the links for the resources we've talked about today should be in the handout attached. But if you have any trouble finding it, do let us know. And as Jen said earlier, the website is currently being updated, so just keep in mind the resources will be under a new training and events section on the website and not under the Use Data website once the website has been updated. So finally, I'm just going to quickly discuss some of the top tips that we've had from students who have done dissertations before. So these are from students who've submitted their dissertations to us for the Dissertation Award or for case studies, and we asked them to let us know things they wish they'd known before they analyse secondary data. So these are some tips to bear in mind when you're planning and working with data for your dissertation. So the first tip is to start exploring data sets early. So it's a good time now to start looking and exploring the data that we have. Jen's talked through how to do this and how to have a look on the website. So start having a look to see what data might fit the questions that you're trying to ask. And if you're interested in a particular topic, you can look by theme, keyword, and variable, and that should help you get an idea of the data that's available for what you're interested in. Our next tip is to remember it's okay to spend a lot of time finding a topic. The student who recommended this, I think, looked through 50 different data sets. I don't expect all of you will have to look through that many, but you're going to be writing on this topic for a while, and this student said it's much better to look thoroughly now and find some data that fits your research question so you're really understanding your topic well. So once you've found your data, take the time to explore the source, understand how it was collected and what the implications are when it comes to interpreting this. So it's really important to understand how your data was collected. So think about things like whether it was cross-sectional or longitudinal. Was it part of a longer series? Was it done as a telephone or a face-to-face interview? And who was the sample? This can all change how you interpret and report your results. And this information should all be available in the documentation that accompanies the data. And that brings me to my next point. So the student says, use the documentation to check that the data set you select contains the variables you need. So as well as giving you all the info on how the data was collected and all the variables included with the data set, it should also, as well as giving you info on how the data is collected, it should give you information on all the variables included. These can usually be found in the user guide and the data dictionary. But if you do have any trouble finding this after having an explore, we do have a help desk that you can contact who should be able to help you find the variables that you're looking for. And our final top tip is to take advantage of all the resources that are available. So this is all the resources listed above. And this student in particular recommended Nestar, which I know Jen mentioned earlier. So those are our top tips from previous students. So just before I hand over to Jen to conclude, I have one more poll. So this is just to find out a bit about what kind of resources you think might be helpful when working with secondary data. So dissertations doing secondary analysis need more resources on thinking through a dissertation project, secondary analysis of quantitative data, secondary analysis of qualitative data, popular and interesting data sets, and how to cite data and make reproducible research. Are we able to? Yep, so we can see the results now. So it's quite evenly split between all the different topics. So it looks like you'd all find most of those things quite interesting, slightly less interested in information on popular and interesting data sets. So thank you all, and I'm now going to pass over to Jen, who will conclude and answer any of your questions.
That's great. So to offer some kind of conclusion, I'd like to sort of emphasise that students can access most of the data that we have in our collection for their dissertations. And also the range and scope of data means that hopefully we've got a lot of reasons for you to consider using data available via the UK Data Service. If you do choose to use some of these data sources, as Ali's gone over with her top tips, is spend some time thinking about what's realistic. For example, some data sets are more complex than others. And for ideas, look at the case studies and information about previous winners of the UK Data Service Dissertation Award. And look to see if there's any guides that might be able to help you. And also just to go back to Ali's point about the upcoming webinars. So if it is that you want some more information about particular types of data that we've just mentioned today, or about finding an accessing data. You can register for the upcoming webinars online, or if it's a webinar that's already gone, you can get a recording of it via the YouTube channel. Most of all is, if you do use our data, think about entering the UK Data Service Dissertation Award, because we'd love to hear about the projects that you're doing, and we want to sort of celebrate students who are going to work very hard on their dissertation and write really great projects.